This is the podcast all about energy, vitality and motivation. And today, focusing in on an important component of that, happiness, and how to be happy.
Hi, I'm Tony. I'm an author, presenter at Sky Sports, and years ago I went to the jungle and got ill. Very ill. So this is my podcast adventure to find more energy. It's packed with biohacking, science, health tech, supplements, and some of the most well-known experts on the planet.
This is something I spent 4 months of my life doing with electrodes glued to my head so that you can do a lifetime worth of meditation.
Decide what you don't give a fuck about, which is something you don't care about.
Some of it gets quite out there.
I had some stem cells sent up to my house that I had stored, and then I injected myself with mannitol.
And we even hack hangovers.
Alcohol is poisonous. So is water and oxygen in the wrong dosage.
So that's my podcast, Zestology. Live life with energy, vitality and motivation.
Hello again. Thanks for listening to Zestology. Today's guest is the deputy editor of the Sunday Times magazine, and I know him very well because I read his column every week. If you open the Sunday Times magazine, if you're in the US, you won't know what I'm talking about here, but if you're in the UK, it's the most popular broadsheet Sunday newspaper here, and there's a magazine, Sunday Times magazine. You open it up and pretty much on the first page there is Matt Rudd's column. And today on Zestology, we're talking about his book and men and happiness. And you know, the thing about Matt Rudd is he's a brilliant podcast guest because he's so self-effacing and dry. And you'll hear it through the podcast. He's very modest and understated about his own talents. And a couple of times he makes reference in the interview to how he's wittering on, but he's really not. And a couple of other little surprises as well, like he prepared very, very well for this podcast by reading my book, which he didn't have to do, and he did, and then told me how badly he'd prepared for the podcast. So lots of ways that Matt impressed me, and I enjoyed talking to him about men and happiness very much because he is almost exactly the same age as me, and his book, which I'm reading at the moment, is resonating with me very much. There's a lot of similarities, I think, between his life and mine, although his kids are a lot older than mine. So I hope you find this useful, I hope you enjoy it, and I hope it energises you at what has been a challenging time for the world. I'm recording this podcast introduction a little bit ahead of time, and honestly, who knows what's going on in the world since I've recorded this. So certainly everybody needs a little bit more energy and vitality at the moment, a little bit less anxiety wherever you are in the world, not least if you're somewhere besieged by some of the darkness and war that we've seen over the last few weeks. It's very depressing. And so I'm, without further ado, going to move on to that's like the opposite of a warm-up man for a comedian, isn't it? Going into Matt Rudd, but it's what's actually going on at the moment. Can't not acknowledge it, and in my own clumsy way, that's what I've tried to do there. Anyway, let's talk about men and happiness. And here is Matt Rudd on Zestology. Brilliant. All right. Well, Matt, we're recording now. Great to talk to you. Thanks for agreeing to do this.
Thank you very much for having me. It's good to talk to you.
It is. I'm a big fan of yours. Bit of a fanboy. I've been reading your column for a while.
Well, I'm looking forward to leaving this conversation with some extra zest. I see this as you helping me because you're the expert.
Perfect. Now, I'm reading your book at the moment. I'm very much enjoying it. So I'm going to start with the big one. Is midlife unhappiness inevitable?
I think when I wrote this book, I was setting out to prove that it wasn't. I think it's been, a year of this pandemic, and to be really brutally honest with you, I'm still struggling. I don't think I've cracked it yet. I think there's two answers to that. There's these sort of things you can do for yourself that make the sort of midlife crisis more bearable. And then there's the big, societal changes that need to happen in order for, us not to all end up in the places that we inevitably do. At the moment, I think I think we think about happiness too late, particularly as men. We're taught from a young age, you've got to get the gold stars, you've got to pass the exams, get to university if that's your thing. Then you're at the bottom of the job ladder after all that hard work, passing the exams, and then you fight your way up the ladder. And it's always thinking ahead and planning for the future and worrying about the next 5 years. And that's what happened for me. That's why I had my midlife crisis. So it wasn't really a crisis. It was more midlife doldrums. I just suddenly I thought, right, so I've ticked a lot of the boxes. I've sort of made it, and I'm waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning in a panic.
Yeah, I'm quite interested in the fact that you and I are about the same age. I think I know from one of your recent columns, I'm just a little bit older than you. And we've been working for, so I'm 47, so sort of midlife, as you would call it in your book. And we've also spent quite a large chunk of time working for quite traditional media organizations. And I was really shocked when I got to Sky 15 years ago at just how old school and unreconstructed everyone was in the way that they communicated with each other. Having come from a very cuddly, touchy-feely radio environment where you got called in once a week by your boss and said, "Great job, Tony." It was all sort of, then I went to a place where really I only got feedback if I'd fucked up. And I just wonder whether that's, famously sort of newspapers are even more that sort of environment. And I wonder if that sort of vibe where men suppress their emotions is even more amplified in industry such as ours.
Well, I've been here since just after 2000, since 2002. And even here in that sort of very traditional working environment, things are changing. We get a very annoying email every week asking us to fill out how our welfare is. There's stuff.
Oh, great. That's very good.
We have talks, but the reality is, and I don't think it's only true for media industries. A lot of industries, it is still very traditional, and particularly for men. I think, as I talk about in the book, it's still very rare to find men asking for proper parenting leave when they have kids, for example. I went and spent a couple of weeks with Aviva, who just after they announced that there was equal parenting leave regardless of gender, it was incredibly annoying how happy all the dads were. They were having got to start off, their parenting experience, helping out the mums, balance, I'll look up, don't worry, I'll do that. Not this sort of, I had 1 week off for child one, 2 weeks off for the next two. And it's just,
I can't believe that.
It was really hard for my wife.
Yes.
And I don't think either of us have really caught up. So, and then again with the pandemic, suddenly, men who had previously been largely absent during the week are leaving for work before the kids got up and getting back from work after they've gone to bed. That all changed, and most of the research for this book I did before all that happened, and suddenly everything I'd been whinging about had magically come true. We were all working from home. So I think there's a lot of exciting shifts going on. I know we're all desperate to get back to normal or whatever that is at the moment. It feels like we can be quite positive. There are things changing. It's just very slow and too late for old you and me. Yes,
except it's not. And that's the whole focus of my podcast. And I know the focus for your book as well. I was quite shocked actually when I read your book, or as I'm reading at the moment. Your daily routine for many years has been pretty intense. It's long hours. And that takes its toll. Quite apart from the fact you only get a week off or 2 weeks off when your kids are born, it's very hard to just shift into parenting mode when you get home anyway, but especially if you're getting home after they've gone to bed.
Yeah. And I think, and I don't want to ruin the thing that you're trying to do, but I think I reached a point where it's hard to express, and I still find it difficult to talk about, but I'd got to a point where I just didn't feel like I had any space to look after myself, think about myself. Everything was so finely balanced. And if I did stop and think, I would find myself catastrophizing about, what if I lost my job? What if I can't pay the mortgage? What about the kids? You know, you have so many responsibilities that you stop giving yourself the time and space to think about yourself. And the thing that I found difficult, and I do find difficult with self-help, is I think you've got to get to the point where you can receive that stuff first, because you know there are lots of brilliant books and podcasts. You do them, lots of other people do them, that offer solutions. But for me, I wasn't even in the headspace I was so worried that if I started, you know, creating space for myself, then the fine balance I'd got just by running between one thing and the next would all fall down. And that's where the book came from, because I started talking. My solution was to talk to all these other men who looked like they were successful and holding it all together and had this perfect existence. And when I actually sat them down and had a serious chat with them, they were also blocking everything out, didn't want to hear about their, you know, wellness or self-help or anything like that. They just wanted to kind of struggle on and hopefully make it to the gold watch.
Yeah, the gold watch. Yeah, it's I've got a group of about 6 mates, and we meet up about once a month and have a meal, and often do a sort of activity beforehand. We go to flight club or go and play tennis or something, and it's always very. I mean, it's just fun, you know. It's I'm very close friends with them, but it's not particularly deep. And that's basically my social life actually now. But I read Irvin Yalom's, well, I've read a few of his book. I don't know if you've heard of Irvin Yalom. I mean, he's fantastic. And I read his autobiography. And he spoke about these men's groups that he'd been a member of for very many years. And about 4 different groups, including a group of psychotherapists, and I think just a group of local men who got together and spoke about how incredibly rewarding it was having a sort of structure, not me and my mates just going out for a steak and having a bit of a laugh, but actually going around and saying, okay, well, I'm really struggling with parenting, so let's all talk about that. And I thought, God, that'd be bloody nice to be a part of a group like that. I don't know how to do it, and I don't know that any of my mates want to do it, but that seems to me to be one way which would seem to be incredibly hippy dippy, but actually be so rewarding to be a member of a group like that. And you probably get to know each other very well.
Yeah, it kind of goes against what we're taught from a young age, that, you know, boys must succeed and men must be strong and silent and not complain. But I've been to some of those structured men's groups. It's very overwhelming sometimes.
Is it?
There's a real gulf between that sort of thing that is, you know, that's beginning to start now, and you meeting in the pub with your mates. And what I found is I was having very superficial conversations with my closest friends, also hiding behind activities, all the, you know, the midlife crisis things we were doing to prove we were still young, surfing, mountain biking, all that mammal nonsense. And when I really reached a point where I didn't have a midlife crisis. I know I didn't get a rash in the jungle like you did, nothing so dramatic. And I actually think this is going to sound really bad, but if you have a crisis, something really dramatic in your life happens, it forces you to confront what's going on in your life. But for most of us, it's the sort of muddling on through, head down, keep going, that's the problem. So when I reached the point where I just wasn't sleeping and my mind was just being ridiculous, I went and sat with friends and kind of forced us to have a serious conversation. And it was, you know, the first pint was a bit tricky, and then the second pint we were having really, really serious conversations. And then when I wrote a piece in the Sunday Times on why, you know, it was quite an annoying headline. It was something like, why are successful middle-aged men unhappy? Which is, you know, middle-aged men are really low down in groups we feel sorry for, to be honest. We've had the whole society set up for us. So what on earth are we complaining about? But I reported on all these miserable middle-aged men I'd spoken to. I expected a backlash. And what happened is, lots of readers and a lot of female readers were writing in saying, that's my husband. I wish he would open up about where he's at as well.
Wow. It's very British, isn't it?
Very British. And to be honest, I haven't talked about the book for a few months, and I've been kind of not dreading. I mean, this is a lovely conversation, but it is difficult because you're always in your head thinking, this is embarrassing. Why am I talking about this? And the other thing is, this, just to go back to it, so many men, I think, feel that if they do start scratching at the surface, everything will fall, the pyramid of cards will fall down. That's how sort of the foundations of what they've built up just don't feel very strong at all. So it's this soldiering on.
As you were talking then, I sort of felt really lucky that I had a healing crisis, because all that sort of shame's gone out the window now. And obviously it actually provided the springboard for doing this podcast as well. But thank goodness I did, really, because as you say, I was forced to confront it. And when you're not working and you're feeling ill and you're not sure if you're ever going to go back to work, then there's not much else to talk about. So that forced me into it.
Prescribe healing crises. It's not this. I mean, the real way to do it, I think, is to bottle what you got, as you do with your books and podcasts, and it's just trying to get men to engage with that. And I was joking when I said it's too late for us, but quite a lot of sort of younger men who I wouldn't expect to be reading a book like mine, they read the articles and they think about, oh no, what's going to happen when I'm in my mid-40s or 50s? And if they start thinking about it when they're a bit younger, then you can put things in place. But it's really, I think, the thing that you don't necessarily get with a lot of self-help programs is that it's really hard.
Yeah.
Interrupting this podcast for one moment to remind you, my podcast partners are Magnesium Breakthrough. Unfortunately, a lot of us have been beaten down by anxiety, stress, and poor sleep, especially recently. Definitely me as well. Due to all the uncertainty in the world, if you're a working parent, you have the extra difficulty of keeping your kids occupied 24/7 while you've been trying to work from home. You've probably done that over the last year or two as well. If you feel exhausted and burnt out, you're not alone. And this podcast is all about energy, so we need to do something about it. There are so many people in a similar place at the moment. What can we do to enhance our mental wellness and recapture our zest for life? One of the things that I do, and I tell other people to do as well, is take magnesium, specifically a magnesium that covers all the important types of magnesium that you need. Because if you go on Amazon, there's a lot of different types of magnesium. Magnesium Breakthrough sorts it out. You can sort of break that anxiety cycle. You're getting 7 unique forms of organic full spectrum magnesium for stress relief and better sleep, all in one bottle. I use it every day. magbreakthrough.com/zestology. If you go there and use the code zestology10 to save 10%, and also now you'll get free shipping as well. I'm not sure if that used to be the case, but you do now. So go to magbreakthrough.com/zestology, use the code zestology10 during checkout to save 10%. There's a phrase that it might be quite a British phrase. I don't know if Americans use it, and a lot of people in America listen to this podcast. But you know what I think Magnesium Breakthrough does? It takes the edge off. You can take 2 capsules before you go to bed, and you might well be amazed at your mood and your energy levels. I've sort of tweaked it a bit. I take 1 before bed and 1 in the day as well. The idea is take more magnesium, you get more energy, stronger bones, healthy blood pressure, less irritability, a calmer mood, and it takes the edge off. How about that? magbreakthrough.com/zestology. Use the code zestology10, and in the UK, that code will work on the UK Bioptimizer's site as well. Now, back to the show.
what you do very well, and is also very British, is you're very sort of self-deprecating and humorous about it all, which allows people who are a bit skeptical in the first place to actually relax and enjoy it and get into it.
Well, I've also had some quite angry people who I mean, unfortunately, it has a title that makes it sound like it's got all the answers, but it definitely doesn't. So, yeah, I think it's important to, if we can understand that a lot of men are unreached by the sort of the self-help books that work for other people, and then try and work out why. I mean, for me, I talk about it. Forest bathing, for example, which is something you've talked about, is presented as a sort of panacea. It's something you do every day, 5 or 10 minutes. Go and sit with yourself in the woods or whatever you've got near you, and just, be at one. I really, really struggled with that when I started. I tried it, and what I was doing is I was sitting in the woods panicking about my mortgage. It just didn't. It just was,
yeah.
And so then I kind of needed to put an audiobook on, or look at my phone and get distracted. And it took probably 6 months because I knew that I was really not happy, and because I just wasn't sleeping, I knew I needed to do something. And short of going and getting proper therapy, or doing it really serious, or resigning, or moving to Scotland, or whatever it is, I knew I had to keep persisting. And it took 6 months of just calming those thoughts. And then finally, and today still, it's a really important thing. And it's small, but that's a step for me.
There's something known as the law of requisite variety, which is the more different things that you try, the more you will find something that works for you. So forest bathing might not, but an audiobook might, and everybody's different. So it's worth, I mean, even with therapists, the first one might not work, but the third one might. So it's always worth keeping going. I mean, to redress the balance a little bit, I do feel like when I first started training in NLP, for example, that was 17 years ago, and it was properly self-help, or people saw me as self-helpy. But now I notice more and more, previously people or men I would consider to be fairly unreconstructed, coming up to me and saying, oh, that stuff you were talking about, I'm quite interested in that. And friends of mine doing sort of stuff like cold water swimming and meditation, and realizing that that's good for them. And I also personally feel, and maybe it's because I've had the healing crisis, that I'm more authentic and happier and more myself than I've ever been, and less worried about what people think. So I just want to redress the balance a little bit about being in my 40s,
Yeah, no, Tony, absolutely none of this was in any way a criticism of anything that you do. It's
I know, yeah.
And I've tried a lot of the things that you've recommended.
I'm talking more about men in their 40s in general.
Yeah, but it is really shocking how many men just can't engage. So I haven't, even though it's pretending to be, I haven't written a self-help book. I've just written a book going, we're all in the shits. What on earth's going on?
Yeah.
How are we going to change it? And then it's amazing the conversations I've had since then, people who've read it, and then, for me, the comfort, and this is really selfish and unpleasant, but the comfort for me was realizing that I'm not the weirdo. All of these people who are more successful than me and look like they're happier than me are going through exactly the same nonsense. And that with the forest bathing and a few other things, I just felt like I started to gain a bit more control, which means I can pick up books like Zestology without just going, no.
Yeah. That's what we found about parenting, actually. It's so hard in the early days, and we're sort of, why do we find it so hard and other people don't? And of course, the part of that is looking at other people on social media who are having a great time, and they're not really, but so it is helpful to talk to people on that score in particular for us.
Yeah. And I mean, parenting is another whole area that needs to be, and I've got 3 boys, And, having spent 4 years researching male mental health, exploring my own male mental health, I can see, even though, I've done all of this, I can see them getting kind of co-opted into a system where I think the next generation's so much more clued into all of this stuff. But I can also see, we've got our eldest is doing his GCSEs, and we say, doesn't matter, don't worry about the grades with that type of parent, whilst obviously also quietly hoping they do all right. But, the pressure's there. And then that hurdle's gone, and it's the next one. And we've got such a brilliant conveyor belt for getting people to, get through and contribute to society. I think the next step is going to be really kind of rethinking the whole education system, making it more Swedish. They're so great in Sweden. Oh my God, could have a whole hour on that.
Yeah.
Lots of different areas: parenting, childbirth, early careers, how you start your careers, all of that stuff.
Yeah.
There's loads of different things that with just a few tweaks. And just to go back to what you said, I think and this word is overused, but authenticity is a thing that I'm not there yet. But I do feel like when I emerged from my doldrums and started thinking, everyone's feeling like this, everyone's stressed, just relax and you're doing okay. Since then, I felt, I feel more authentic. Or maybe I don't, and I'm lying.
I'm sure you do. I think you've spent enough time on all of this. And I think it's, I think it's people really appeals to people when you're sort of honest. You say, I don't have all the answers, but I'm sort of looking into it. And that's the job of a journalist as well. And I'm interested to know about how things are for you now. And it's deadline day for you with the Sunday Times magazine. You're in the office. I know that you live in the country. I mean, that sounds to me like a pretty long day, full stop, coming into London, getting on the train, being in the office. What's your day like today, and how has it changed from before writing this book?
It's horrendous, and it hasn't changed at all.
Hasn't it? Oh no! So where do you live?
Definitely, I'm not. Well, I live in Kent.
In Kent, yeah.
It's a hellish. It's been a good commute because everyone else has been, staying at home.
Yeah.
Lives. So it's none of the fundamentals have changed, but the way I approach that it has, which is not a very helpful answer. But yeah, I think I'm more relaxed about the what ifs. That's my big, because what if X happens? Well, we'll deal with it when it does. Yeah. And so right now it's a busy day. I don't know what I'm going to write for my column tomorrow, and I've got to race home and go via this. We're all in the same. We've all got loads of rubbish to do, but it's how you approach them, which again is a really unhelpful, vague answer. Shall I tell you about the happy man I met during the whole research for this book?
Yes, please. Yeah.
He's the happiest man in Britain.
Okay.
And I can tell you because you said you're reading the book, you haven't got to the end.
Yes, so I haven't. Yeah.
So your listeners don't need to buy the book. He was a young man in Southampton, and he'd done all the, he set up a burglar alarm installation business with his dad. And, on his way, got a mortgage and a girlfriend and all of that. And he had all these, because burglar alarms are, you have an older client base, let's just put it that way. So spending all day having coffee with octogenarians, and they were spending all day reflecting on what they would have done if they could be his age again.
Right.
And so to cut a medium length story short, he was really into Loch Ness monster spotting when he was a kid. He loved Loch Ness. So he went up to Loch Ness and has been living there for 28 years.
Wow.
In a caravan. And he's turned up in newspapers in the past, and he's always kind of described as the weirdo Nessie spotter.
Yeah.
But we spoke to him, and he talked to me about. I said, "What's your daily life like?" And he talks about how if there was a slight change in a weather front, he could watch the light coming across the lock. And I'm not going to do it justice now, but the way he was talking about, he was in the moment when he was describing it to me. And I've only had a few times when I've tried meditation, and I've really felt that, that sort of light. You'll be a total expert at this, but I've only
I certainly will not be.
He was in the moment describing a really small thing, and I just thought, yeah, that guy got it. And obviously we can't all move to Loch Ness. That's not the answer either. But I loved the fact that even, he could be happy about a small thing. And since that conversation, I've that horrible cliche, let's all live in the present a bit more.
Yeah.
I'm trying to do that. And that's difficult for a middle-aged man.
Yeah, you do sort of start to, when I hear that, I sort of think, well, I could live in Thailand. Why not? And I've got a friend, Brett, who's been on this podcast a few times. He lives there. He's not got a bank account. His rent is $10 a day.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. Yeah, that is, so if I could live in Thailand thing, that's because you couldn't. Of course you couldn't. And it is annoying that a lot of these kind of very best-selling self-help gurus, their answer is to be a self-help guru, and we can't all be self-help gurus either.
Yeah. So
for most of us, there's this sense, we can't just make a huge change and bog off somewhere.
Yeah.
But it's trying to adapt. That's what I was trying to get my head around. How do I not, throw everything out, go and live in Hungary, abandon the kids, whatever the answer is.
Yeah.
How can I sort of carry on, coping and providing for who I need to provide for, and having the relationships and friendships I've got, and be happier? And I'm probably about 60% of the way there.
Yeah, a lot of it is. It seems to me like, so much of what you've talked about today boils down to presence and acceptance. And actually, if you're the sort of person, I've got another friend, Taylor, who has in the last few years, he's lived in Brazil, New York, Hong Kong, Istanbul, Mexico City, and he's never happy. And I went and visited him in Istanbul last week, and he said, I've got this idea, mate. I'm going to go and live in Valencia. It's great there. He's not even been to Valencia, but it's just the next place, So it's not location based. I think it's inside his head based. That's my theory with him.
Yeah, it's that the grass is always greener thing is the big problem.
Yeah.
That's the thing that gets me. I'm very lucky. I'm a man. I've had a lot of, I'm born in Britain. Things have turned out well for me, and I can still look at my neighbour and be envious of something, holiday he's going on. And comparing yourselves to other people is a really bad thing, and it's almost impossible not to, based on the way we're raised and told to succeed. And that again goes back to what we expect from our kids.
Yeah.
Now I've got all serious again.
Don't worry about that. The world of personal development needs less gurus, less Tony Robbins, and more of you, I think.
No, that would be a disaster. No, I said my bit, but I do think if there are middle-aged men listening to this, that the first step is to go to the pub and not have a superficial conversation. And it will be hugely embarrassing for the first half an hour. But I started by just literally saying, can we have a serious conversation? And after about 20 minutes of ribbing and teasing and jokes, it emerged that we had a lot in common, and we immediately, our friendships developed because we got through that sort of superficial banter, which is also important. But for me, that was my first step. And then the second step was to subscribe to your podcast.
Good. Excellent. I'm very glad to hear that.
And therefore, because you're such a devoted podcast listener, you will know that there's two questions I ask, which is what is one recommendation for more energy and vitality, and one book that you would recommend that you've enjoyed or has resonated or you just would recommend to people?
No, I had a book when I first saw this, and it's completely gone out of my mind. That's so frustrating. Oh yeah, Jitterbug Perfume.
Okay, what's that?
It's by Tom Robbins, and it's a very Still Life of a Woodpecker is a better one of his. It's an entire story that takes place inside a packet of Camel cigarettes. And I think sometimes when it comes to reading, you're better off avoiding all the books that, all the self-help stuff or the miserable man down books by people like me and just doing some papers. And I thought about your vitality question and I haven't got a clue. I'm absolutely exhausted at the moment. So I will have a cold bath later as recommended by you.
What about forest bathing?
Forest bathing. There you go.
Yeah.
But
okay.
You've got to do 6 months of it and it's awful and then it gets better.
Yeah. I think it's it also acts as a bit of a metaphor for getting out in nature, doesn't it? Which is always nice. And you probably get a bit more of than I do being in London, but
I think I know we're ending, but I think actually it's quite tricky. The forest, it is a metaphor for getting out, but I think you've got to really force yourself. I actually there's a little bit of moss in the woods at the end of our road, and I sit there, no phone, no looking around even. I know is that meditation? I don't know. But if I'm walking, I'm distracted and then I suddenly get into the spiral thinking. So it's sitting like a statue, forcing yourself to get through the awful thoughts about the horror of life until you find everlasting happiness.
What powerful, inspiring words to finish on.
God, sorry.
Matt, thanks so much. Really good to talk to you. Genuinely, I love your columns and I'm really enjoying your book at the moment. And it's really shocking, actually. You're talking about the statistics on middle-aged people, feeling more anxious and less happy, and it makes you realise how important conversations like this. So thank you. And just remind people what the book is called, and obviously it's available everywhere.
Thank you. Well, I've also enjoyed this conversation and I'm feeling more vital and energetic as a result.
Good.
Thank you. The book is called Man Down, Why Men Are Unhappy and What We Can Do About It. But as I say, it's not that helpful.
Are you anticipating objections?
I'm just hoping the publisher doesn't listen to this. It has all the answers.
Watch out for a massive spike in sales over the next week or two. Matt, thanks very much. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you, Matt, and thank you for listening to the podcast all about energy and vitality. It just remains for me to say that I am brought to you this week by my podcast, not me, by Magnesium Breakthrough, my podcast partner, which has been around for more than a year now. And I'm so pleased that, as I said last week, I do a lot of due diligence on my podcast partners, and I wouldn't partner with anyone or any product that I didn't personally use and think is a good thing. And I definitely use Magnesium Breakthrough. In fact, very shortly going on holiday, and one of the supplements I will be taking with me is Magnesium Breakthrough. So you can go to magbreakthrough.com/zestology, check out why Magnesium Breakthrough is so much better than the other magnesiums. I'll give you a primer. It's basically because all the main forms of magnesium are in this one capsule. So you don't have to go onto Amazon and think, oh God, do I need magnesium glycinate or taurate or chelate or one of the many other types of magnesium, because some of them basically just give you a dodgy tummy, and that's not what we want. You get all 7 important types of magnesium in one capsule, and helps you relax, helps you sleep, helps you with anxiety, important at these sort of times, and lots of other things as well. Go to magbreakthrough.com/zestology, use the code zestology10, and if you're in the UK, you can use that same code on any product on the UK Bioptimizers site, which is bioptimizers.co.uk. That is it. Have a good week. Thank you for listening, and I will see you next week.